Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was a brilliant Roman military leader who turned the Roman Republic into the mighty Roman Empire through his military conquests across Europe and the Mediterranean. He played a critical role in the demise of the Roman Republic through his populist reforms and power struggles, culminating in his controversial dictatorship and assassination in 44 BC. Despite his polarizing persona, Caesar left an indelible mark through his military genius, statesmanship, and reforms that reshaped Roman politics, law, and society for generations to come. Cleopatra VII. The last pharaoh of ancient Egypt, Cleopatra was a powerful, ambitious, and charismatic ruler who skillfully navigated the complex politics of the declining Ptolemaic dynasty. Her strategic alliances with Roman leaders Julius Caesar and Mark Antony allowed her to briefly revive Egypt's influence before its ultimate annexation by Rome. Celebrated for her intellect, beauty, and cunning, Cleopatra remains an iconic figure whose life was a tumultuous struggle for power and survival in a world increasingly dominated by the rising Roman Empire. Augustus. As the first and one of the greatest Roman emperors, Augustus presided over the vast expansion and the consolidation of the Roman Empire following the fall of the Republic. His reign initiated the Pax Romana, a 200-year period of relative peace, prosperity, and cultural renaissance. Through brilliant political maneuvering, military might, and far-reaching administrative reforms, Augustus transformed Rome from a fraying republic into a stable imperial power that would dominate the Mediterranean world for centuries. Saladin. An influential Kurdish Muslim sultan, military genius, and chivalrous warrior, Saladin led the Muslim opposition against the European Crusaders in the Levant. He is best known for recapturing Jerusalem in 1187 after defeating the Crusader armies. Saladin's unwavering leadership, strategic brilliance on the battlefield, and respect for his adversaries made him a celebrated figure in both Muslim and Christian histories of the Crusades, and a symbol of Islamic resistance against European encroachment in the Holy Land. Louis XIV. The Sun King ruled France as an absolute monarch from 1643 to 1715, presiding over France's classical age. His reign saw the centralization of power in the monarchy, the rigid enforcement of royal authority, and the expansion of France's influence as a dominant European power through an aggressive foreign policy and the spending of vast sums on wars, architecture, and the arts. The Palace of Versailles became a symbol of his lavish court and his claim of divine monarchical right. Peter the Great. Tsar of Russia from 1682 to 1725, Peter the Great initiated a program of westernization and territorial expansion that transformed Russia into a major European power. He implemented sweeping reforms aimed at modernizing Russia, including reorganizing the army along Western lines, promoting education, secularizing political administration, and encouraging trade and industry. His founding of St. Petersburg as Russia's window to Europe was a symbolic break from Moscow's medieval past. Catherine the Great. Empress of Russia from 1762 to 1796, Catherine continued the westernization policies of Peter the Great. Under her reign, Russia expanded significantly through wars and diplomatic means, annexing Crimea from the Ottoman Empire and gaining territories from the successive partitions of Poland. She promoted education, architecture, and the arts, while her political reforms strengthened autocracy and serfdom. Her reign saw Russia fully emerge as a great power in Europe. Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon rose from a minor noble background in Corsica to become Emperor of France from 1804 to 1815. He waged a series of victorious campaigns across Europe, spreading revolutionary ideas and the legal administrative reforms of the Napoleonic Code. However, his continental ambitions and quest for empire eventually led to his downfall against an alliance of European powers. His legacy shaped modern French nationalism. Abraham Lincoln. The 16th U.S. president from 1861 to 1865, Lincoln led the nation through the Civil War, its greatest constitutional, moral, and political crisis. His steadfast leadership preserved the Union and set the stage for abolishing slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. His eloquence, as exemplified in the Gettysburg Address, helped transform the war into a struggle to end slavery and promote equality. Queen Victoria. Queen of the United Kingdom from 1837 to 1901, Victoria presided over the massive expansion and industrialization of the British Empire to its territorial peak during the 19th century. Under her reign, the British monarchy took on a more symbolic role as parliamentary democracy strengthened. The period was marked by rapid population and economic growth, prompting social reforms and the spread of Victorian morality standards across the empire. Mahatma Gandhi. The preeminent leader of the Indian independence movement in the 20th century, Gandhi pioneered the philosophy of nonviolent civil disobedience, satyagraha, to protest British rule. His tactics of non-cooperation and non-violent resistance inspired activists worldwide, and his leadership was pivotal in India attaining independence in 1947 after nearly a century of struggle. Gandhi espoused a policy of nonviolence toward all people. Winston Churchill. As Prime Minister from 1940 to 1945, Churchill rallied the British people during World War II and formed an alliance with the U.S. and Soviet Union to defeat Nazi Germany. His defiant leadership and oratory skills personified British resistance despite German bombardment, while his strategic foresight helped lay the groundwork for the Allied forces' eventual victory in Europe. Though resoundingly defeated in the 1945 election, he later returned as Prime Minister from 1951 to 1955. Franklin D. Roosevelt. The 32nd U.S. President from 1933 to 1945, FDR led the nation through the Great Depression and World War II. The New Deal programs enacted during his first two terms put millions back to work and expanded the federal government's role in regulating the economy and providing social services. As Commander-in-Chief during World War II, he helped forge the Allied coalition that ultimately defeated the Axis powers and planned the post-war world order. Joseph Stalin. Stalin ruled the Soviet Union with an iron fist as General Secretary from the mid-1920s until his death in 1953. While his policies of rapid industrialization transformed the USSR into a world superpower and allowed it to play a preeminent role in defeating Nazi Germany in World War II, his totalitarian regime was marked by extensive political repression, forced collectivism that killed millions, and a cult of personality. The Cold War's beginning can be traced to tensions between Stalin and the West. Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was the fascist dictator of Nazi Germany from 1933 to 1945, perpetrating some of the most horrific crimes against humanity in modern history. Fueled by a poisonous ideology of racial supremacy, virulent anti-Semitism, and desire for totalitarian control, Hitler set in motion the systematic genocide known as the Holocaust. His regime was directly responsible for the industrialized murder of 6 million Jews and millions of other victims through concentration camps, mass executions, forced labor, and ethnic cleansing campaigns. Mao Zedong. Founding father of the People's Republic of China, he led the Communist Party's struggles against the nationalists and established a communist state, but his policies, like the Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution, resulted in widespread suffering. John F. Kennedy. The charismatic 35th President of the United States inspired a generation with his youthful vigor and lofty vision, deftly navigating the Cuban Missile Crisis while advancing the space race and civil rights before his life was tragically cut short by an assassin's bullet. Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was an anti-apartheid revolutionary who sacrificed 27 years in prison fighting for racial equality in South Africa. His unwavering activism and vision ultimately led to the dismantling of the oppressive apartheid system. In 1994, Mandela was elected the first black president of South Africa, guiding the country's transition into a multiracial democracy. As president, he promoted racial reconciliation and social reforms to undo the legacy of apartheid, becoming an iconic global figure for human rights and justice. Martin Luther King Jr., leader of the American Civil Rights Movement. Through nonviolent resistance and powerful oratory, he played a pivotal role in ending legal segregation in the United States and became an enduring icon of the struggle for racial equality. Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The first woman to hold the position, she implemented conservative economic policies, privatization programs, and assertive foreign policy stances during her time in office. Kim Il-sung. As the founder and longtime dictator of North Korea from 1948 until his death in 1994, Kim Il-sung established a brutal communist dictatorship. He demanded absolute obedience and developed an entire cult of personality, with propaganda portraying him as a divine leader. His regime committed widespread human rights abuses, implemented disastrous economic policies, and pursued the development of nuclear weapons, leaving a legacy of totalitarian oppression. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq with unrestrained brutality from 1979 to 2003 as an authoritarian dictator. His regime was marked by horrific human rights violations, including the chemical use of weapons against Kurdish civilians. He instigated the Iran-Iraq War and the invasion of Kuwait, leading to the Gulf War and devastating UN sanctions. Saddam maintained power through fear and violence until being overthrown by the 2003 U.S.-led invasion. Angela Merkel. Serving as Chancellor of Germany from 2005 to 2021, Angela Merkel provided steady leadership through numerous economic and political crises in Europe. As the longest-serving elected EU head of government, she championed liberal democratic values and human rights, while managing issues like the Eurozone debt crisis and the 2015 refugee crisis. Though criticized by some, she left a legacy as an influential and pragmatic stateswoman who helped shape a more integrated Europe. Barack Obama. As the first African-American U.S. president from 2009 to 2017, Barack Obama inspired millions with his call for hope and change. His signature domestic policy was the Affordable Care Act, which expanded health care access. However, his presidency was hindered by partisan gridlock over issues like immigration reform. Internationally, he pursued diplomacy over military action, negotiating the Iran nuclear deal while deepening U.S. ties with allies. Vladimir Putin. After becoming president of Russia in 2000, Vladimir Putin has ruled with an increasingly authoritarian grip over nearly 2 decades. He has cracked down on dissent, smothered a free press, and repeatedly amended laws to extend his time in power. Putin has also sought to re-establish Russia's global standing, annexing Crimea from Ukraine in 2014 and launching a full-scale invasion in 2022 despite widespread international condemnation. Xi Jinping. Since becoming president of China in 2013, Xi Jinping has rapidly centralized power by sidelining rivals and abolishing term limits. He has aggressively promoted a nationalistic agenda, expanding China's military footprint globally, and cracked down harshly on human rights in regions like Xinjiang and Hong Kong. Xi has positioned China as a rival to the U.S., while promoting its authoritarian capitalist model as an alternative to Western democracy. Boris Johnson. The flamboyant Boris Johnson became UK Prime Minister in 2019 and spearheaded Britain's withdrawal from the European Union. However, he was soon embroiled in scandals over ethics violations and mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic. His tenure was marred by allegations of widespread corruption and cronyism, until he was finally forced to resign in 2022 after ministers resigned en masse. Vladimir Zelensky. The former comedian and actor Vladimir Zelensky was elected president of Ukraine in 2019 on an anti-corruption platform. When Russia invaded in 2022, Zelensky emerged as an inspirational wartime leader, refusing to evacuate while rallying fierce resistance, and repeatedly pleading for military aid from Western allies. His leadership and impassioned speeches demanding Russian withdrawal galvanized global support against the invasion. Kim Jong-un. As the third hereditary leader of the isolated totalitarian state of North Korea, Kim Jong-un has consolidated his absolute power through brutal purges and cult of personality tactics, while accelerating nuclear weapons development despite harsh international sanctions. His provocative missile tests and saber-rattling rhetoric have raised tensions on the Korean peninsula,